All right, so now we're live. So excellent. So we heard one question. This is where all the pop-ups went before. Great, excellent. Welcome everyone. This is Enabling Content Editors with Paragraphs in Atomic Design. If you would like to take a look at the slides, either now or later, they're available on GitHub. I'm actually running the slides off of GitHub right now. So any code examples, anything that you want to see later, by all means, have access to it. So really quick about who I am. My name is Levi Sigworth. These are the 3 ways that you can get in touch with me. I'm an independent contractor, moved here about 1.5 years ago to actually just support my wife, who is doing residency at the University of Utah. And I thought, heck, it's a good time to try to start a company and see what happens. So I do independent contracting and help people. I really help content editors to be able to control the content on their website. And I like to be able to control how it looks. And we like to meet in the middle so that we can we're all enabled to do our best possible jobs. So what I said, I had originally said I like to switch everything around and do the FAQs at the end. Or not, I guess FAQs, just the Qs at the end. And I like to put them at the beginning so I can understand what it is, like why you're interested in being here today. So we already heard ready for one question: what's new about Drupal 8, right? And what we're going to talk about today, and how can I implement it, right?
Or what you're sharing. Yeah. Oh, what's new?
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Yeah, there is. Well, actually, there is to answer your question. I thought about it a little bit more.
So it's applicable in 7 and 8.
Yeah, the concepts that we're talking about today are applicable in 7 and 8. Some of the code examples that we're going to look at are actually specific to 8 because it's Twig, and Twig is kind of the magic bridge that connects a couple of different systems that we're going to look at together today. But the concepts could actually be applied to 7 or WordPress or anything else, really. Yes, question.
Well, what I'm interested in finding out, we have websites at our company, and we're using paragraphs, and they have a lot of templates. It seems like the development team, we're always like one step behind what the content editors want. They want more and more and more. And so we just, to give them more flexibility, we added CK editor with tons of plugins as a paragraph type. So they're doing that. It's still not more. I mean, they've got an image with text in it in the CK editor. They just made a page. It's like, I feel like we're always going to be one step behind with what they want. So it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't take a picture of text and put it in with CK editor. That's
right.
not a good practice. So we're going to, well, we created a style repository. We're at the very beginnings of that. And I don't know, it seems like they always want more than what they have. They have a lot, but they want more.
I'm hoping that the end of this talk will be valuable. I'm going to talk about process and working with teams working together, development and content, and what's a process that we can work. And I think that hopefully this will be something that you can take and refine. Any other questions?
We currently are in migration from a content management system in-house to 8.
Okay.
And
great.
What we found is that the paragraph type seems to be much more complicated than it should be. So I'm trying to make that as simple as possible for content owners so we can build it and not overcomplicate.
Okay. And you're using paragraphs to
do all sorts of things.
Do all sorts of things. Yeah, absolutely.
On different levels of.
Right. Yeah, it's all about defining those paragraphs and making sure that those paragraphs are tied to the use cases that we the same. You're both kind of similar questions. Yeah. What I'm doing today is not going to solve any of the problems, right? But it'll hopefully give you some ideas and some patterns that you can then use and adapt and take on. The goal for me today was to make sure to introduce the ideas, so that way we have a solid foundation, and that way we can start to build on top of it. So I'm hoping really. I'm going to use code a couple times, but really I'm up here to talk about process. So that's what really gets me excited. So we're going to look at any other questions? Anybody else? Okay, good. So we're going to explore paragraphs for building out the content detail pages. So we're not going to look at everything in Drupal today. We're just going to look at the content detail pages. So when I say a content detail page, is there anybody who is evaluating Drupal for the first time? Or just kind of like thinking about, hey, is this Drupal paragraph thing for me? Okay, excellent. So a content detail page. So within Drupal, you'll hear this idea of a content type. And so a content type, let's pretend it's the English department, right? So the English department might have a content type of, say, people, right? Who works for the English department? Might have news. We're going to publish out upcoming. We're going to publish out some things that we want to talk about. Hey, we won an award for something. And we're going to talk about events. Hey, we're having our spring poetry reading slam happening. You know what I mean? So we want to publish these things out onto the site. So what we're going to look at specifically today are the detail pages for each one of those content types. Or not each one, but potentially each one of those. We're going to just look at that. So we're not looking at, like, say, listings, or we're not going to look at the home page. So we're really going to focus on that. These concepts are applicable to those other things, but I just want to kind of frame it that we're just focusing really specifically on the detail. The other thing, we're going to be looking at combining paragraphs with atomic design. So paragraphs are, the reason why we want to do this is to have that separation of concerns that we talked about before, where the development team is going to be controlling how the thing looks, and the content entry team is going to be controlling how the thing.
You're not showing this slideshow. It's you can hit that green button again to share your screen. The green on the left.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, thought that had restarted. I appreciate the heads up very much. Thank you. So we're going to look at exploring combining paragraphs with atomic design. Just for the recording, I'm going to jump back real quick and just let you know that if you want to look at the intro slides, the slides that we missed, that's where the URL that you can go to. All right, so let's go jump forward. So we're going to explore combining paragraphs with atomic design. So the goal here is to enable our content editors to be able to control the content and not have to worry about, adding a CSS class in a specific place in order to make the thing do the thing, right? And specifically, I'll take a look at, I'll show you a real quick example of what I'm trying to do. And then finally at the end, I'm going to propose a process for developing paragraphs so that they work for the content editor. So I'm not going to give you every paragraph that you're ever going to need, right? Like the paragraphs that I'm going to show you today are probably going to be the most basic thing that won't solve any of your problems at all, right? But the idea that I want to show is how do we get atomic design and paragraphs to work together so that we can then introduce a system that allows us to be able to explore newer and more complex paragraphs that are ultimately what we want. All right, so quick terms, just three. The first is, what is Drupal? Drupal is a way for us to be able to set up really complex pieces of content so that a content editor can then enter that stuff and have it come back out in really complex and interesting ways, right? So Drupal out of the box, WordPress gives you a lot out of the box, right? Drupal out of the box, not quite so much, but then we can work on it and get it to do some really, really cool stuff. So Drupal, the way that I think of it is a little bit more like a framework. It gives you a bunch of tools to be able to then build these really complex and interesting solutions. What is Paragraphs? So Paragraphs is a community module, a module that's developed by the larger Drupal community that you then apply to Drupal itself. So if you were to start to work on these things, you would grab Drupal core, and then you'd also grab this other module and apply it to your Drupal core installation to be able to use Paragraphs. So small reusable widgets for building out the content for a detail page. And we talked about this earlier. So this is what I said that I wanted to try to get around. So a lot of times in Drupal, you'll see that you have just one large body field, right? And that's where we enter all of our content. We're going to put a video here. We're going to do this. What if I wanted, I don't know, a slideshow, right? How am I going to do the markup? I mean, how am I going to train a content editor to just do the markup for that, right? Same with the situation that you're having, right? So probably it's people are trying to get around this kind of stuff because it's not quite enabling them to do what they want. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to switch it out, and what we're going to do is give content editors an ability to enter a bunch of different types of content. So for me, this is actually just my site. I'm using my site as a demo here, and I didn't have a whole lot of use cases, but I had these three. We're actually going to talk about image and code, and this is just regular text that's dropped in there. So what I can do is if I need a new image, if I need to put a new image on my blog post, then I just insert the image one, and then I fill out the fields for that. And if I need it above the text, then I put it above. And I need below the text, I put below, right? So it's just you start to take these tiny, small, reusable widgets to build out content details. And then the final one is, what is atomic design? So atomic design is, it's bundles of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that allow us to be able to compartmentalize little tiny pieces that we're going to reuse over and over and over again. The goal being that we are able to make sure that any changes that we make to this thing is localized to that one item. And we can really focus on getting that one item to work in the way that we need it to. And then over time, we can also change it and know that we can change it in a reliable and predictable. Okay. So let's take an example. And what we're going to do is we're actually in process, but we're going to start at the beginning in a little bit. So this is what an example piece of code looks like on my current site. This is actually a screenshot of it. And so there's a little bit of styling on the left-hand side that you can't quite see. But what we have is we have two sections right here within this widget. We're not going to focus. This is just the text above it, so that actually isn't part of the widget. The paragraph right here is just we're going to show an example piece of code, and then we're going to show a caption. So those are the two parts of this paragraph, and this is the end result. And I'm going to show you the end result of what the HTML and CSS looks like. So what does the final generated HTML look like? The thing that Drupal is actually putting into the browser. So we just have a figure for the code, and we're using namespacing. This is called a BEM naming structure, and I have a link to it at the end. I'm not going to get into that today, but you can learn more about it. I have a long list of resources at the end of the slides here that you can take a look at that. But we're using BEM to compartmentalize this, so that we know if we make any CSS changes to paragraphs-code, we know that it will be localized to this one little widget. And you'll see that we drop the content in here for the code example, and then we drop the caption in there as well, right? So the important thing here is we have two different systems that are coming together. We have Drupal that owns the content, and then we have Pattern Lab, which is an implementation of the idea of atomic design that owns all the templates and all the structure. And what we're going to do is we're going to flow all of the content from Drupal into that template in Pattern Lab, right? The idea being Pattern Lab gives us the ability to gives us a place to quickly prototype and test things out, and then we can just flow the content right in there. So that if we make any changes to the design on Pattern Lab, it automatically shows up. All right. The final generated CSS as well. So everything is localized to paragraphs-code. I'll scroll down just real quickly. So you'll see that everything is localized within that paragraphs-code namespace. And that's just something that I picked up, that I decided for myself, so that way. And there's no JavaScript for this widget. In fact, none of the ones that we're going to look at today have JavaScript. I'd be happy to show you some other ones that I've built for clients that do have JavaScript if we want to get into that. So let's start at the beginning of the process now. So we saw the end. We know what we're going after. Let's start at the very beginning of the process and what that might look like. So let's build this component out together. And see how we can walk, or at least how I walk through the process, and hopefully there's something that will apply to your situation. So rough sketch, right? Super easy. Takes about, what, 8.5 seconds to do this? You know, the goal is we want to be able to get something out the door as quickly as possible so we can start to get feedback and figure out what the thing does. So we're just going to focus on the blue section right now, okay? This is, let's pretend it's a blog post, and we're going to show just the code. And this is me roughing out how do I want this thing to work. So within the step one, the very first idea is to understand when is there a need for a component. And what I'm asking by saying this is saying, what's the system that we're trying to build? What is similar? What can we reuse? What can we do over and over and over again with consistency? And then we're going to see in the next one, what's consistent, but then also what can change? What kind of introduction to variance can we put? So let's jump back here and take a look at this. What is the system that we're trying to build? We might have suggestions, and I realize it's just squiggles, right? I think the uncomfortableness that we're all feeling right now is how it works whenever we're doing this, because we don't know, right? The thing is it might have 2 more fields that we're not aware of, but the point is get it out the door so we can start to. So I'll give you a hint. There are 2 parts here to this system.
Well, you're wanting a pre-formatted for code. That widget, maybe some H1s, paragraphs.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So we want to display the code, right? So that's one part of the content. And then we also down here we want a paragraph with maybe a caption, right? So this system, this tiny little system, has 2 parts. For now, might have more. We don't exactly know how it's going to look, and that's okay. That's not where we are in the process. So understand the need for a component. Think about what is the system that we're trying to build. And that's the most important part. That might have a lot of discussion right there, right? And being able to put something on a piece of paper really, really quickly is very helpful because we're not trying to get perfect. We're just trying to get something out. All right. So again, system level thinking. Step 2 is create the component in Pattern Lab. Okay. So whenever we create a component in Pattern Lab, it's really comprised of 5 parts. We have a Twig file. We have a Sass file. And so if you haven't used Sass, what it is we're going to create a small Sass file it's tied directly to this component. And it's all going to be, we're going to have hundreds of these files. And they're all going to be compiled over then. There's going to be something that runs and compiles it to a single CSS file that then is what the Drupal site uses as well. There's a JSON file for sample content. I think this is huge. To be able to get something in the browser with sample content, to take a look at it, squeeze it, play with it, see what happens, right? A markdown file, so this system is self-documented, so you can have markdown in there that allows you to explain either to a developer how to implement this component. You might be style guide suggestions on how a design team or maybe like a content team uses a component. So you can build all that stuff in there. And then a JavaScript file as well if there's any kind of interaction with how the component works. Okay. If you you can use this Pattern Lab starter. So that sounds like a lot. Like, oh gosh, I got to write all these things, right? The cool thing is it's a template and it looks the same over and over and over again. So we can start to do some runners that allow us to be able to allow it to build these things for us, right? So this is what the Twig markup looks like, and this is going to look very, very similar to the final generated HTML that we looked at before. So by default, there was a question about what's new in Drupal and Drupal 8. So this is all using Twig, which Pattern Lab can use as well as Drupal 8. If you're in Drupal 7, Drupal 7 uses a different templating structure, a different templating engine, I guess. So you'd have to then reduplicate this. But what we're going to do is we're going to build this template in Pattern Lab, and we're going to have Drupal say, go grab that and pull it in. So that way we update it in one place and everything it's perfect synchronization. So what we have here is we have that class name that I decided, and we're going to be able to show the code inside of here, inside of a couple of tags. And then if a caption is passed along, we're also then going to put the caption here, like you said, in a paragraph. Okay? So this is our system, the 2 parts of our system that we're building out within. Yes. So here is some CSS it's actually some Sass that we put into here. And what happens is a lot of this stuff, these includes our functions in a way that allow us that'll automatically build that stuff out for us. Okay. Here's the JSON file. So here's the example content of what we're going to look at. So step 3, test the pattern in the browser. Okay. This is massive. This is a huge, huge step because we haven't spent any time building anything in Drupal yet. We haven't even touched Drupal. Okay. And we already have 75% of the work done, right? How long would it take to build out that sketch? How long would it take to mock up a little bit of HTML, right? So we can start to put stuff into a browser and test it there. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So this is Pattern Lab really quickly. And so we're going to break things down into their smallest pieces. What are the colors that are being used? What are the fonts that are being used? And you can break things down into really specific pieces. So this is within Pattern Lab. This is our little component. And it's kind of hard to see what's going on here. So I actually built a template page that's going to demo all of the different components together. And I think it's a little bit easier to take a look at on this page. Right. So as we scroll down, we're going to build out these picture ones here in a second. But as we scroll down, this is what a piece of code looks like on there. And so when I say test it in the browser, it's not just look at it, but shrink it down. See what happens. How does it work in mobile? How does it work on tablets? Right. You want to get really fun, put it on disco and just watch it jump around and see what breaks. Right. The idea is to get this to make it break as quickly as possible. So that way we can fix it as quickly as possible because we haven't put a lot of effort into building this out yet, right? If you, I'll rant later if we have time. So I think it's really, really important to be able to get stuff into a browser to be able to test it as quickly as possible, because now you can start to get feedback and say, hey, content entry team, does that work? Is that right? You can have some really interesting and powerful conversations right now, and we got there in 20 minutes, right? So you can block out 10 of these at a time and sit and have a meeting and walk through all of them, right? You can give it to a client and say, hey, go home and test this stuff, or sit at your desk for 20 minutes and test this stuff. Put it on your phone, put it on your tablet. Does it actually work? They can go put it in front of their end users and find out if that thing works for them as well, right? We haven't hooked up anything to Drupal. We haven't deployed anything. That you have a testing system that's available. Started. I would make the argument that this is much, much more useful. Having something in the browser is much, much more useful than having something on a static comp that someone's going to have to still build out anyway. And all the work that we've done so far is going to go into the live site. So it's work that had to be done no matter what. All right. So step 3, test your pattern in the browser. Not just you, your clients, your end team, anybody who wants to be involved, project managers, everybody test in the browser, because someone's going to find some stuff that the developer missed, right? Someone's going to find, the client's going to realize that they need this other field to do this thing. Okay. So build the functionality in Drupal. Now we're finally getting into Drupal. We're starting to take a look at it. And how, for this specific one, how we're going to do it is we're going to do it using paragraphs. And this whole talk is about using paragraphs in Atomic Design. So figure out, actually, let's go back here and take a look at it. What does the functionality look like in Drupal? So we have a bunch of paragraphs. And I'm going to scroll down here and show, here's one that, here is the paragraphs one on, and we're looking at the live site. By the way, the Pattern Lab here is also looking at the live site as well. My Pattern Lab is publicly accessible. So this to kind of prove that this is all exactly synced together, right? So this gets, every time I push a commit up to my site, my design system gets rebuilt on every single time. And then so if I make a change in the design system, it automatically flows over to the live site. So here's what the paragraph looks like. Our system had 2 parts, the code that lives right here and the caption that lives right underneath it. And if we want to take a look at what it looks like on the live site, there's the code and here's the caption. Is it the best looking thing? No, I made it. I'm not a designer, right? Like I wish I had Jeremy to help me out with that. But the point is the point is I could always go back and I always can go back and make changes to that and make it work, right? With help, because we all need help. All right, so that's the, whoops, let me go forward because I think that's actually where we want to be. So that's the 2 parts to the system. And I need to be on the right tab. Okay. And figure out the template name in Drupal. And we can do this by using Twig Debug. And so what happens here, for the interest of time, I'm going to go a little bit faster. But whenever we turn on Twig Debug, what that'll do is it'll put some comments into our markup, and that'll tell you what's the template that's currently being used, and it'll also tell you what are some template name suggestions that you can use to then overwrite this. So what we find out is the name of the template that we need to overwrite it, because whenever we first build it in Drupal, it's not going to be using our Atomic Design template. It's going to be using its own template, and we want to change that out. So once we know the name of what we want to do, we create it in our theme, and I'll be happy to show this to folks on like where this all lives within the template. Just grab me at lunch or anytime during the day. So pull the Twig template into the Drupal theme once you have created that file. So what we're doing here, so this is what Drupal sees, and this is the name of the Twig file that we found out by turning on Twig Debug. And so now we're overriding the default paragraph template that the paragraphs module gives us. And we're going to define our own for this for code. And what I'm doing here is you'll see that there's no HTML, right? What we're doing is we're embedding that one that we created over in Atomic Design, over in Pattern Lab. We're embedding it there and we're just passing it data. So on Drupal's side, for this particular module, or I'm sorry, for this particular widget, all we're doing is passing off the data from Drupal into Pattern Lab and letting Pattern Lab do it. Okay? So that's what we do. And that's how it ends. And then we test it and we deploy it and then we figure out what doesn't work and then we fix it. Because now we've built a system where we can introduce change in a predictable and consistent way. All right? So the first one. Questions? Yeah? No? Okay. By all means, jump. Raise your hand, yell, jump. Yes?
Well, I'm just, again, because I've been just hearing so much about this and Atomic Design, I know there's a lot of different ways you could implement this type of thing,
Yep.
right? So I'm trying to understand, would Pattern Lab be just like the style template, right?
Mhm.
That's serving. So it's just, there's probably any number of similar style templates that could be used. But like, is Pattern Lab, like, I'm looking for advantages, disadvantages for, say you just would look for a JavaScript library, would
Right.
that work? I mean, there's just so much to consider. We're just trying to find one way to do it.
Yeah, so there are, I like Pattern Lab because it works the way that my brain works and this kind of component stuff. I was not doing anything this interesting, but I was trying to do something this interesting before Pattern Lab came along. Didn't do a very good job, so I just kind of jumped on this shit.
So it's just a nice.
Yeah, it's a really great way to be able to demo stuff in the browser, to be able to iterate on things in the browser before you spend the time of building things in Drupal, right?
Because we were going to use GitHub Pages for the visualization, but I guess we would be doing that on our own, just building something. But if you're using Pattern Lab, they've already got a nice.
Right. Yeah. So I think you're talking about the difference between a style guide and like the design system, right? So there are style guides. There are absolutely style guides out there, and for a lot of people, sometimes that's all you need, right? It's just like, this is how a header works. This is how tables are always going to function.
With the code snippets.
With potentially with code snippets, yeah.
It's in the browser.
The thing for me about this is the perfect synchronization. So if I want to iterate in things in Pattern Lab and Atomic Design, I know that I can make changes and it'll automatically show up in Drupal.
Which is very.
That's the part to me. So I don't have that second step where I have to then go, okay, so I worked on my design system. Now I have to go over here to Drupal and implement, re-implement, right? Which is what you have to do in Drupal 7 because they don't share the same language, right? They have Twig versus PHP template. And I've done this in Drupal 7 where I build it, and I got to build it, right? So like my goal is cheap, quick, fast.
Yes.
How do I iterate and reliable? Those are the questions that I'm trying to answer. And that's why I use this system. Some people just having a style guide is absolutely the right way to go, right?
So say that we wanted to go with this system, but we already have an implementation of paragraphs. I mean, we probably have to rework some things.
Yeah, you'd probably have to do a lot of like going over to the design system, figuring it all out, and then going over to paragraphs and then just pulling in that template, right? At the same time, maybe not. Do you have to go? Maybe you just do the next new one,
Right?
Atomic Design, and then get your workflow working that way, and then you can always come back and rebuild them, right? Because you have all those templates that are sitting there running in Drupal.
Right.
So.
Right.
So you just, maybe it's just the one next one. Do the littlest thing you can. And we'll talk about that at the end. Do the smallest thing that you can. Don't try to change the
I
world.
certainly do very little.
Yeah, do as little as possible. Exactly. Yeah.
Build the skateboard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep, 100%. All right, let's take a look at the second component. We're going to introduce a little bit of variability here. But the concepts are going to be very much the same. So here, let's pretend these are an example of 3 different blog posts, okay, on one page, because I'm cheap and I only want to use one piece of paper. So we're going to take a look just at the blue, and we're going to ask, what's the system that we're trying to build here? What's the same and what's different? So let's start off with what's the same. Just shout it out. What's the same between all 3 of these? Image? Yep, exactly. What was it? I heard it.
Caption.
Yep, the caption is the same between all 3. Yep.
Well, everything's the same.
Well,
It's just the placement of the image. That's the only difference.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just trying to break down like what are all the fields
the
that
caption is at the bottom,
Yeah.
but it also varies being on the left or the right.
Correct. Yep. So exactly. So we've introduced the variability. So what's the same is the image, the caption. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and tell you that this is the byline, right? In my head, it's the byline. Out here it's squiggles, but in my head it's the byline. So if we took the picture, and we'll find out in design, this is how I originally thought, and you'll find out when you look at the design, it's not how I implemented it because it didn't work visually to me. So you're right. So that's all the same. Now what's different is the variance between left, right, and big. Okay. So what I want to do is enable my content editor, which is me, to be able to decide, do I want left or right or big, right? But I want everything else to remain the same, and I want to use one template, and I want that to be consistent. So if I ever make changes to this system, it rolls out. Everybody. Okay, so step one, we did it. Think about what's the point of, like, what's the system that we're trying to build. So create the component in Pattern Lab. Okay, so what we've done here is we've built this out. I ran that npm new, make me a new one. Okay, and so we have the image and we have the different parts here. So we have, and I'll show you the demo here. This is like a demo image from Pattern Lab, and we're going to replace that then whenever we have Drupal provide the image for us. Here's the byline, that little tiny squiggle on the corner. Okay, and here's the caption. And the variants then gets introduced right up here. If a style modifier is passed, give me paragraphs dash image dash dash left right hero, right? So we introduce that new CSS class on the top, and then in my Sass, I'm going to look for that CSS class and make things do stuff. So that's how that gets added. So you'll see here, here's where my style modifier left. So now I decide what are the different things that I want to do. So paragraphs image, they all get this stuff, right? I always want the margin bottom to be the same, no matter if it's left, right, or big. And then if it's left, I'm going to do things. And then if it's different breakpoints, I'm going to do different things just for left. And then same thing for right, I'm going to do different things. And then under different breakpoints, it's going to be different, right? And we're going to keep on going down through. So that's how I introduce variants with a CSS class at the very, very top of that component. So JSON file, test data, do test data, right? I'm going to sit here and say, don't use lorem ipsum, use real data, right? This is when I first did this. This is what I learned, was that having real data in there actually impacts how the design works, and you're going to want to change your design based on it. So putting it in, don't do what I'm doing here. Find real data, and that's why when you said you were pulling things out with paragraphs, you have real data. It's fantastic. Use it. You know, like that's seriously, that will get you so much.
I think it helps the decision makers too.
It helps the decision makers. Now they know what fields you're looking for, right? In the same way that you have real data as well to work with. And you might have, if you're trying to rebuild these paragraphs, maybe you want to go grab a couple existing ones. Then you go, oh, you have these 4 that are the same and these 2 that are a little bit different. How do we make this system work? You know? Okay, test it in the browser. So let's go back and take a look at what this looks like in the browser. So again, I have specific ones. These are all individual, and what I have is a template page where I'm pulling them in around content to be able to demo it. So when I'm saying test it in the browser, test it by itself over here when you make that individual element, and then put it into a big long page like this that demos your page and see how it works. So you'll find out I had these down here, but it also turns out whenever it's a little bit bigger, oh, come on. When it's a little bit bigger, I had the space to throw it off to the side. So that wasn't something that I had anticipated whenever I was building it out. But now I got it in here and I went, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I'll play with that, you know? I think that's these kinds. Okay, here. So watch the text. Watch the text. It ever so slightly gets smaller, right? That's something that we can only do in a browser. We can't do that with a Photoshop mockup. See how it gets. How are you gonna tell someone that interaction, that experience, right? So I think getting it into the browser is hugely helpful to be able to test. Plus, you'll realize once we make it small, they're all exactly the same. There is no left, right. Left, right doesn't exist anymore because there's no space to make left or right. So they only become left or right slightly higher. It's stuff that it's very easy to show in the browser and very difficult to explain in any other way, right? Plus, we're making websites. Put them in the browser. All right. Build a functionality in Drupal. So I'll show you that really quickly. So we're going to take all of those different parts and put it into, we're going to make a paragraph. And let me find an image. Here we go. So I've uploaded the image. I've given it an alternative text because it's important to give alternative text, especially at a university, but especially everywhere. We have the byline. So what's the URL? So my byline is actually composed of the title and then the URL of, I want to link off to wherever the picture came from because, again, I'm not a designer. I don't take my own pictures. I just take stuff from Creative Commons. Figure caption. So this one doesn't have a caption, so the caption's optional, but I might have wanted a caption. And then down here is where we introduce the variants. So left, right, or hero, I get to decide. Right? So let's actually just go ahead and switch this and make it to the left. And we'll see what happens. Watch this break. So now it's on the left. And we want it to be hero. back the way it was, and save. And now it's big and takes up the whole width. So we're just passing that off to the style guide. All right. Build the functionality in Drupal. Figure out the template name. We talked about that. Use Twig debug to figure out the template name. It'll tell you in the comments in the HTML itself. Hold the component Twig template into the Drupal theme. So what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to embed what we build in Atomic Design in Pattern Lab. And we're just going to embed that template, and we're going to pass it information. Okay. And what's different here is there was a block with that image that was pulling in the test image from Pattern Lab. Instead, we're going to replace everything that's in that block now with the image that gets rendered. Right. So right now, this is actually using templates that are provided by Drupal. So there is HTML now that's getting passed in here. If I were being exceptionally thorough, as I should be, then I would also have a component over in Pattern Lab to deal with this field too, right? So not just the paragraph, but also the field. And this is where components within Pattern Lab start to get interesting. All this nesting, like what's the level of where you need to do, right? Because when I first did this, I was just going to pass a URL for the image, and then I said, wait a minute, Drupal has this really awesome thing with like where you can do different sized images based on the size of the browser and stuff. And I go, okay, I'm just going to pass everything that Drupal gives me. I'm just going to drop it right into that little slot right there. Okay, so let's talk about process, because questions, same variants. Okay, so let's talk about process, because to me this is where the fun stuff is, right? So I think that we end up asking ourselves, how do we make a perfect site? Because especially at university, especially maybe for marketing, right? Like it's all about image. It's all about how good you look, and it's if you have it. And people who notice things, perhaps that most of the audience might not, but nonetheless, they're going to notice it. You know, I'm saying it's really important. And so people want a perfect site, and they maybe they think about the last time that it happened where it wasn't a perfect site. Has anybody built a perfect site, by the way? Yeah.
Oh yeah, me.
Okay. Yeah, it said hello world, and that was it.
Okay, perfect. Genuinely,
anything else, you couldn't break it.
Yeah, that is the only perfect site is hello world, if anything. So, actually, thank you. So I've never made a perfect site, and I don't ever expect to make a perfect site, right? And what ends up happening, I think, is we try to control so much up front, and then it happens at the end as we have a go launch day, and then things we compromise, and then more compromise, and then more compromise, and then people get upset, right? And then they remember that, and they go the next time, no, I'm controlling everything. We're going to have it nailed down. We're going to have exactly how it looks, right? And the more you try to control it, it's like sand, just going to go through, right? So I don't think that's the right question to ask. I actually think the right question to ask is, how do we make a cheap and reliable deployment process? Okay? Because trying to make that thing perfect is under the assumption that we can only ever launch this one big time, or maybe we can only ever launch this one big time and then one big time a little bit later. These giant launches. If we can answer the question, how do we launch this 5, 6, 8, 20 times a day? Then suddenly we can start to introduce change and fix problems in a much, much faster way, right? So if we can answer this, we can start to get closer over time to a perfect site. We're still not going to have a perfect site. We never will. So if we can answer this question, how do we make a cheap and reliable deployment process? Then what we can start to ask ourselves, instead of making the perfect, instead of making this is, I think I might want, we can start to say, what's the tiniest thing that allows us to achieve our goals? The tiniest MVP, if you've heard of that, like the agile stuff, right? So minimum viable product. What is the smallest possible thing that gets this out the door, so that because we know we can make changes to it in the future? My goal with what I presented today was to show a system that I believe answers these two questions just for exploring and iterating with clients, right? There are lots of other parts to answering these questions: automated testing, deployment processes, systems for on the server for rebuilding the site in a consistent and completely the exact same way over and over and over. Right? Anybody not launch on Fridays? We have that rule, right? Because we're all scared because we're going to be working all weekend because some failed on the deployment, right? I launch at 5 o'clock on Friday, and I don't sleep. Because we have these systems in place to make sure. Genuinely, I've had sprint wrap-ups between 4 and 5 on a Friday, and I've launched between 5 and 6, and then right? So it takes a while to learn, get that trust with your system, but once it's there, it's there. So let's go back and review all the steps to talk about this process when we're thinking about what's the smallest, tiniest thing that we can build, right? So understand the system, the need for a component. What's the system level thinking? What are the smallest number of fields that we can get to make this thing work? How do we get this thing out the door, right? How do we get it in front of people as quickly as possible? And I think with Atomic Design and Pattern Lab, it gets you where you can template things out really quickly, get it into a browser, and start to take a look at it with real content. It's awesome. And be able to start to get feedback on that from all the stakeholders who are involved. Because really, we're making websites. We're not making pictures. We're making real websites, so let's put them into the browser. Create the component in Pattern Lab. Again, how do we create the smallest little templates to be able to build that thing? So right here, this is huge. Stop. This is step 3 is stop. Test the thing in the browser. Collaborate with every single stakeholder involved, right? Get feedback. Reiterate. Do it over and over and over again because it's really cheap still. Really, really cheap, right? To write a little bit of HTML, to make 3 of the exact same implementations but with different content. This system will actually, you can do things where it will change the content for you every time you refresh. It's kind of neat, right? But do multiple versions. Do a whole bunch of stuff. Because again, it's still really, really cheap. But what's cool is the work that we're doing now still gets then flowed in later. So it's kind of cheap to work here, but not time. So stop here and do all the work, right? Do as much work as you possibly can, but also the smallest amount. All right, build a functionality in Drupal. We looked at figure out the template. We looked at pull the twig component template into the Drupal code. And then release, gather feedback, and do it again. Because we have a cheap and reliable deployment process, and we've done the smallest amount, so the expectation is we're going to do a little bit more. And we're going to do that over and over and over again because it increases communication between the development team and the content team. And also, once the content team realizes that you can do this, they'll trust you, right? Because they're not waiting for 2, 3, 4, 5 months for a giant deployment. They're realizing that they're getting it. I mean, it might be a couple of weeks because you have a backlog of things to work on, but they give you that stuff too, so they get to decide what the priority is. You might be able to get it out on Friday, right? Pretty cool. All right, so steps to take on your next project depending on who you are. So if you're a content editor, if you're a client, demand that everything is shown to you in the browser. Stop accepting PDFs or Photoshop mockups or anything like that that you can't interact with. You should be able to interact with everything at this point. And you should be able to interact with on your browser, on your phone, anywhere that you want to test the thing. Ask for a website to test. Developers, reach out to become part of the design process. Too many times, and I have been in this mode. There's an entire design process, and then the developer's over here, and it gets just thrown over the wall, and the developer then realizes, hey, there are these 14 things that nobody thought about, and I wouldn't have been able to think about them either, but I put them into the browser and I started testing with them. I went, I see that, you know? So ask to become part of the design process. I would dare say demand it, because, and when you figure out how to get designers to let you do that, let me know. So that way I can use those tactics as well, right? Because I'm not going to tell you that I'm perfect at this, because I'm not, right? But reach out. Let people know that you want to become part of the design process. And if you're handed a Photoshop mockup, because you will be handed a Photoshop mockup. These aren't perfect systems, right? Change takes a long time. So someone's still going to give you a Photoshop mockup of a 1920 wide, might have just done this, 1920 wide, and they say, we want it responsive. And I say, okay, I'll do all of your work for you, no problem. So what I'm going to do, so what happened is still put it in Atomic Design. It gives you an opportunity to test. It gets you out the door, and you can start to put this stuff in front of people really early to say, here are the 14 things that nobody thought of. And it's not their fault that they didn't think of it. They weren't using the website. They were using Photoshop. You know what I mean? So I think that's two things that the developers can do. Project managers, prototype early with Atomic Design. On the other side, project managers, get your developers involved in the design process is what I'm saying here. And make it a point to never, ever put Photoshop in front of the client. Anything static, don't put it in front of the client if you're a project manager. You have the control to be able to make that happen. I'm not saying don't use Photoshop. By all means, in-house, work with it. Developers everybody can collaborate, okay? Use Photoshop Inside to figure out all your content structures and your colors and all that kind of stuff. Just never put it in front of a client because you're going to set false expectations and then people are going to set it. Okay? Last story, because I love this story. Anybody bought a car? Yeah? Bought a bicycle? Right? So the process that we all use to buy the car or the bicycle, right, was we looked online and then someone sent us a picture and a description and drive, and this is how long the tires are going to last. and then we bought the car. Right? Isn't that, no? That's not what we did. What did we do to the car before we decided if we want to buy it? Test drove it, right? We have to do the exact same thing with the website. Picture of a car is not good enough. Description of a car is not good enough to actually describe what the thing is going to be. We have to get the thing in the browser, right? Pictures aren't good enough. So that's my favorite thing. Anyway, so I put a bunch of resources in here to take a look at it. There are some required Drupal modules that you have to have in place in order to do this stuff. So don't just copy the code. Make sure that you have this stuff in as well whenever you install and try to test things out. Atomic Design starter themes. This is new to me. So the whole idea of mixing Atomic Design and Drupal 8 is still really new, and people are still figuring stuff out. What I did over here was something bare bones, and there are some really opinionated starter themes that are in place now, and I'm really excited to go and see what they do because I have so many questions about how to do some weird stuff. And I want to see what they did, and then I'm going to steal it or use it, or, whatever. So the point is like people have done a lot of work, so there's more code examples to take a look. And there's a broader version of this talk. It's pretty much the same thing, and I like this one more. So, as should be the case a year and a half later. So, and if you want, you can take a look. All right, so a bunch more stuff that you can take a look at. There's nothing here that I'm going to highlight except to say thank you. And all these slides are online, so give me, I'm happy to talk with you, give me feedback, and file an issue. If you see a typo or if you think what I said was completely wrong, file an issue either way, and we'll be able to work on it.
Welcome the internet trolls.
Yeah, exactly. Jeremy, if you're not my first issue, I'll be upset.
Okay.
So, okay, very good. Excellent.
Give me 5 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we're only 5 minutes late, which means that we're hopefully have enough time to get through much. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Questions? Anybody want to? Anybody want me to demo anything while we're here? Or take a look at it or explore something?
That would be cool to see.
I know it's lunch. I'm not like it's. You're really gonna pick lunch over me?
One question is so you made this